Hello everyone, back tuning into the winter 2017-18 forecast from gasweathers.com. So, we've finally arrived at the end. We have been doing winter updates since the beginning of September. We did 12 winter updates, as well as 3 seasonal model roundups. It's all been building up to this point. We are finally there now. We are finally at the winter forecast, which we have been saying is going to be released on the 3rd of December. Well, this is it. It is the 3rd of December, and it's time to give you the forecast. So that's what we're going to do for this video. We're going to talk to you, first of all, for everything that we've been looking at through this season, and then we're going to try to bring it all together in terms of a spreadsheet and a table that you'll be able to see that brings everything together that we've been looking at through this season. We'll try and pick out the winters that we believe are the closest in terms of our methodology to where we are right now, and then we'll give you the forecast. So it'll be a few minutes, but the forecast will be issued, and I think it'll be quite an interesting one this season, but this winter. So I'll get on with that for you in a second. Just say that later on today, this video will place on the winter updates and forecast page, and there'll be a written report that goes with the video as well. So you can't watch the video in one go. You'll be able to read that written report when you want, and you'll be able to come back and see the video whenever you want on the website. I'll get up around 5-6 o'clock this evening on the winter updates page, something like that. So I think that's really covers everything that I need to tell you about at the start of the video. I'll have more to say at the end of the video. I've got some big thank yous to give out to the people that have been helping bring all this together for me. So that'll be at the end of the video. And also at the end of the video, there will be a little written summary within the video, actually. Again, just going over everything that we've going to talk about in this video. But I think to start off with, we'll go through the methodology and just talk you through everything we've been looking at through this season. Because some people might be watching this that have been keeping up with the winter updates. So it all began really back in the summer. That's when the journey to winter 2017-18 started at Gasweathers. Back in the summer, we did the NAO forecast. So we was looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies in the Northern Atlantic Ocean in the month of May, with a view to creating a forecast going forwards. So what I was looking for in May was a tripod. We was looking for a three-way band of warm to the south of Greenland, and then cold through the central Atlantic, and then warm again through the tropical Atlantic. Now, we didn't have a tripod, but we did have quite a warm Atlantic, and this area in the central Atlantic was quite cold. It's just this area to the south of Greenland that wasn't really quite right. So he wasn't able to issue a negative NAO forecast, but we did say because of the warmth of the Atlantic, and particularly the tropical Atlantic Ocean, we thought that the NAO would probably be more conducive, at least, to negativity at times. And whilst we wasn't able to forecast negative NAO, we did think that this would mean, at the very most, we'd only have a weekly positive NAO this winter because of the warmth of the northern Atlantic Ocean. Now, when we got to September, we started having a look at the winter updates on a week-by-week basis. So the first one we started with was back on the first Sunday of September, and one of the things that we look at in the very first updates is Arctic sea ice extent, and we saw that we did have another really big Arctic melt season again this year. This blue line is the melt season for 2017, and you see it was way below the grey line, and that's indicating the average over the past 30 or 40 years. It wasn't a death spiral. A death spiral melt season happened in 2012, this green dash line, so we was above that. It wasn't the worst melt season we've had by any means, but it was another very big melt season to go along with all of the other big melt seasons that we've tended to have over the past decade or so. There is a connection, we believe, between Arctic sea ice loss, big melt seasons, and a chance or an increased risk of blocking over the polar field through the course of the winter. So this particular methodology probably favours blocking over the North Pole. One of the other things that we have been keeping an eye on is the oceans, of course. So we talked about the Atlantic Ocean in terms of the NAO forecast, but then throughout the autumn, throughout winter updates, we've been monitoring what the oceans have been doing, and particularly in terms of the ENSO region, that region just there, because very surprisingly and unexpectedly, we went into a La Nina very, very late this year. Back in the summer, when we did the NEO forecast, all the speculation was that we was going to have an El Nino for this winter, a warm event for the winter of 2017, 2018. But very late, we saw a collapse of that El Nino signal, and the ENSO region flipped into a cold event, into a La Nina. And this is where we are right now. We are sort of weak to borderline moderate La Nina event territory. So we certainly have a La Nina set up within the Pacific Ocean, equatorial Pacific Ocean, and within the atmosphere as well. In the northern Pacific Ocean, we've also been monitoring this area just here. And this is a little bit colder than it's been, I think, over the past few years. This area has tended to be quite warm in recent years, but this year it is trending a little bit colder, and that might be relatively good news for anybody that wants a colder winter as well. In terms of the La Nina, by the way, we explored what the effects of that could be back in the earlier updates, but a weak La Nina does favour the chance of a colder and more blocked winter. We'll also be looking at the Atlantic Ocean, and well, we still don't have a tripod, but we do have a very warm, or much warmer than average, sea surface temperature anomalies broadly across most of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a little bit cooler still up here to the south of Greenland. That's the reason we can't say we've got a tripod. Also, indeed, to have it colder there. But we do have quite a warm Atlantic Ocean this year, and that should, again, it should sort of dampen down the effects of any positive NEO. So whilst we can't say that the Atlantic at the moment is particularly conducive, set up towards a negative NEO, neither is it particularly conducive or set up towards a particularly positive NEO. And so other drivers are going to be important factors, more important factors this year compared to other years when we may have a very positive NEO type setup. We'll also be looking at this area up here in the Norwegian Sea. That's been running significantly warmer than average, and we believe, but we aren't sure, we believe that might be more of a signal for Northern Europe to have a milder winter. But I have to emphasise what has happened there this autumn is very unusual. We aren't at all certain exactly what the impacts of that warm sea surface temperature anomaly in the Norwegian Sea might be. Connected to the sea surface temperature anomalies, and particularly the warm sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic Ocean, the tropical Atlantic Ocean, is the 2017 Atlantic hurricane season. We've had a hyperactive hurricane season this year. If we scroll down, you'll see one last time the numbers. So we've come out with 18 depressions and come out with 17 storms and 10 hurricanes and 6, yes, that's 6 major category 3 or above hurricanes. It's one of the biggest hurricane seasons on record. It's certainly in the top 10. And we did explore the impacts of this, and the impacts having an active hurricane season very much is that we could see an increased risk of northern blocking, and consequently, perhaps some colder conditions. We've also been monitoring the sun, so the sun and the solar cycle. We are nearing the end of solar cycle 24 now. We are heading down rapidly into solar minimum. This is the latest solar disk on our side of the disk today from solarham.net, and we are again spotless today, no sunspots at all on the solar disk. That has been the case over the past few weeks very regularly. This is showing you how November's sunspot number came out. I wasn't going to include this, but it is very dramatic, and it shows what's happened through this season of updates. So when we started the winter updates in September, we had a spike in sunspots. We went up to quite a high number, really, for where we are in the solar cycle. But a crash, an absolute crash off the edge of a cliff has occurred over the past 2 months. So that's where the sunspot number is for October. But this one, this orange spot just here, is where the sunspot number is for November. And you can see we are at a level there that we can probably say we have entered the beginning of solar minimum, because we really are at a very, very low extent of sunspot numbers now. We have to go back to this sort of period here, back in the sort of middle part of 2009, right at the beginning of solar cycle 24, to find a period when we was as low with the sunspot number as we are in November 2017. So I reckon that sort of level of sunspot number really does mean that we have entered solar minimum. What will probably happen, I think it's a little bit early to keep it at that level, so we'll probably drift up a little bit over the next few months, but and then go down again, of course, and go into then a prolonged sort of true solar minimum. But I think that's enough to say we have at least started going into solar minimum now. And again, we've been looking through reanalysis at what the impacts of being in solar minimum is, and we know that this particular period in the solar cycle, just heading into solar minimum, let's say 2 winters before solar minimum, is pretty good to have an increased chance of blocking and a colder winter. We've had a look through the season, been looking at Siberian and Scandinavian snow cover. This is the latest for the 1st of December, and again we see that we did have a rapid increase in Siberian snow cover through the course of October, and it was very similar, interestingly, to what happened in 2012, in that it's really in the closing days of October this year that we really rapidly pushed that snow line from Siberia into Western Russia. And also we've had quite a lot of snow cover across Scandinavia this season as well. And that, again, it's one of the things that I look for through the autumn, see how the snow is doing across Scandinavia. So all of this kind of suggests, again, that we might have an increased chance of blocking and a colder winter. And then, of course, there's the QBO, the quasi-biennial oscillation. We've been monitoring that, and we know we are going into the easterly phase of the QBO. That's indicated by these white areas just here. And when you're in an easterly QBO, and again, we know this because of the reanalysis that we've done through the winter updates, we know that when you're in an easterly QBO, you do increase the chance of getting a colder winter because you slow down the zonal westerlies, and so consequently you can get blocking areas of high pressure, more so than you do in a westerly QBO, and that's indicated by these grey areas just here. So many things we've been looking at through this season, at least anecdotally, we haven't put them all together yet, we're going to do that very shortly, but anecdotally, many things we've been looking at through this season winter updates have been suggesting the chance of a colder winter. One of the things that have been very much going against that, though, is the long-range model output. So this is what the CFS V2 was showing for winter of 2017-18 back at the start of November, or back earlier in November, and it was showing a very, very strong zonal setup with high pressure through the Atlantic into Europe, low pressure out to our northwest, and bringing the Westies through across the country like that. And I've chosen the CFS V2 as being really quite representative of most of the model output that we've looked at through the season model roundups this season. This is what the CFS V2 was showing for December a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, and again, very strong zonal signal being indicated by the CFS V2 for December, with high pressure to our south and low pressure to our north, and this very mild westerly flow coming through. But I'm going to show you the very latest for December, because the model is moving, and this is the very latest from the CFS V2 for December. It's like very latest forecast. So you'll notice there's really no comparison between what the model was showing for December from the 12th to the 21st of November to what it's showing now from the 22nd of November to the 1st of December. Look how things have changed with above average heights, high pressure around Greenland. We've lost all of that ridging, or nearly all of that ridging, to our south, and instead we've replaced it with a trough of below average heights across Central Europe. And what this would do, it would open the door to much more in the way of northerly influences. That is quite an incredible turnaround that has happened. This is just for November, remember, it's not for the winter, but just for November, just for December, I should say. It's quite an incredible turnaround that has happened there already from the CFS V2 model. And what we saw when we did the third season model roundup, actually, last weekend, we did see that there were a few more models that were just beginning to edge towards not necessarily the colder side of things. We only had one doing that, which was the Beijing Climate Centre, but many models were starting to just pull back ever so slightly on that strongly zonal mild signal that they had in the first two season model roundups. So it does appear now, and this has been the mystery about this season, that the methodology, the gas weather's methodology, appeared to be indicating the chance of a cold winter. But the seasonal models were having none of it. But it does appear now that the seasonal models might be starting to inch their way towards what you would expect from the GasWeathers.com methodology. One last thing I want to show you before I get on with the forecast, because I promised that I would show you this, is the 500 millibar height anomaly for November 2017. I promised when I signed off on last week's 12th and final winter update that I would show you this for November 2017, because what we said with the last winter update was that when you have northern blocking over the Arctic in November, it tends to be quite a strong signal later on for a colder, more blocked winter. It seems that in November the pattern doesn't necessarily have to be cold in itself in November. You don't necessarily have to come away with a cold month, but the pattern itself has to start bedding in, if you like, has to start evolving. The pattern's going to eventually get you to a cold winter. So we do look for northern blocking over the Arctic in November as one of the signals that we might have a colder and more blocked winter. And look at this. This is the anomaly, 500 millibar height anomaly for November 2017. And we do see quite a strong northern blocking signal. That wasn't especially evident when we did the update last week, but then we'd only got 3 weeks worth of data to do the reanalysis on. Now we've got the full month worth, or nearly the full month's worth of data, and we do see that there is quite a strong blocking signal there now for November 2017. And again, this is another factor that might point us towards the chance of getting a colder and more blocked winter. So now it's time to bring everything together, and our good friend James Ackrill, who has been working so hard on these updates this year, has compiled for us a spreadsheet table that brings everything together. So in this column just here, we have solar minimum. This is dealing with the solar cycles. We've got the first and the second year prior to solar minimum. Of course, for us this year, we're probably 2 years away from solar minimum. So it's particularly this column that we're interested in. This column just here brings ENSO together. So it's kind of La Nina to ENSO neutral, ENSO neutral to La Nina, and just ENSO neutral. So for us this year, it's going to be this middle column, particularly that we're going to be interested in, the neutral to La Nina column. This is the easterly QBO column just here. This is the hurricane season column just here. This column is depicting front-loaded summers, because we did have rather a front-loaded summer by pressure and temperature. This column is bringing together wet Septembers. That was one of the things we looked at in the earlier part of the updates, both by rainfall and rain days. This column is bringing together warm Octobers, because we had really quite a warm October. This is bringing together the patterns in October and the patterns in November. A little bit less certain about that, particularly for November, because until a few days ago, it was quite a weak signal for November. We know now that we do have quite a strong, actually quite a strong blocking signal for November. And then just here, this is perhaps the most important part of it, of the table, of the spreadsheet, because this is showing you the numbers of these parts of Gauss-Lorentz methodology that we get. So, for example, let's deal with the very first winter. We've got the winter of 1888, just here, 1887, 1888 begins the spreadsheet. So, for that winter, we've got three. We've got the number 3 just there. We've got 3 parts of the Gauss-Lorentz methodology coming together. We've got the second winter prior to solar minimum. We've got the active hurricane season, and we've got the front-loaded summer by temperature. So we've got 3 out of all of these different elements that we look at within the winter forecast methodology coming together. The next one is 1895, 1896, and that one only has 2. So I'll just show you that. For the next winter, we've only got 2 of those elements coming together for winter of 1895, 1896. We have the Nina to neutral just there, and that's probably not all that impactful this year anyway. And we've also got front-loaded summers by temperature just here. So only 2 of them, and one of those, anyway, the Nina to neutral column, probably not all that impactful for us this year anyway. What we want to do is look for 4 or more winters that bring everything together. So 1s, 2s, and 3s aren't enough to be included in our final analogues package and winter forecast. So we're looking for winters with 4 or more elements coming together, and we do have a few winters to go at. So we've got this one, which is 1921, 1922. That was 2 years before solar minimum. It was ENSO neutral, and also, so I'm on the wrong column there. It was ENSO neutral just there. It was front-loaded summer by temperature, and also it had a warm October. So we come out for that winter, 21-22, with 4 of these elements. The next one is down here, 1950, 1951. And this is a very, very good analogue for this winter. It has 5 of our elements are coming together for winter of 1950, 1951. So it was a neutral to La Nina winter. That's important. It was an easterly QBO winter as well. So again, I'm on the wrong column. So it's this one just here. Where are we? It's this one just here. It's the we've got the November pattern just there. We have got the wet September by rainfall going on just there. We've got the front-loaded summer by air pressure just there for winter of 50-51. It had an active hurricane season, and it had an easterly QBO going on as well. So we have 5 elements of the Gauss-Lorentz.com winter methodology coming together there for winter of 1950, 1951. The next one is 1961, 1962, this one just here, and that one, if I've got the right column, let's make sure I have, that one has 4 elements coming together. So we have wet Septembers by rain days coming together. We have front-loaded summers by temperature coming together in winter 61, 62. We have an active hurricane season, and we have ENSO neutral going on as well. The next one is 62, 63. If you've been keeping up with the winter updates, that one's been appearing a lot this year, 62, 63. So again, it's 2 years prior to solar minimum. It's an ENSO neutral winter. It's an easterly QBO winter. It has a wet September, both by rain days and rainfall, and so we come out with 4 elements of the Gauss-Lorentz.com winter methodology. What about any other year? So let's carry on scrolling down, and we come to we're going to come to next 1996, 1997, which is this one just here, has 4 elements coming together. So for this one, we have, I'm going to have to pull out a little bit so I can show you this all together. So we have the winter of 1996-1997, 4 elements coming together, which are the, so again, I'm going to have to scroll up, sorry about that. So we have got the warm Octobers coming together for this winter, and also we have got that one just there, so let's get rid of that. Sorry, I'm struggling with this a little bit tonight, aren't I? So we've got 4 elements coming together for the winter of 96-97. We've got the warm Octobers. We've got also the hurricane season. We've got the easterly QBO, and also we've got Nina to neutral coming together. And then also down here we have got again 4 elements coming together for winter of 2001-2002, Nina to neutral, easterly QBOs, hurricane season, and also warm October. And then finally, the best year that we've been looking at with this year's season of updates is 1995-1996, because that brings us out with 6. That is 6, again, I say it again, that is 6 elements of the GavsWeathers.com methodology. So winter of 1995-1996 comes out with the analogs package. It was 1 year before solar minimum. It comes out with the easterly QBO as well. It also comes out with an active hurricane season. It comes out with wet September, both by rainfall and rain days. It comes out with a warm October, and it comes out with the October pattern. If we was to include northern blocking, I think it would also come out there as well. So we would actually have 7, I think, if we went by looking for northern blocking. November 1995 did have northern blocking. We know we've had northern blocking as well for this November also. So November 1995 comes out pretty good, as does the winter of 1995-1996. So those winters that come out with 4 or more elements of the GavsWeathers.com methodology, how do they shape up if we put them together? So these winters are 1921, 1950, 1961, 1962, 1995, 1996, 2001, and 2012 as well. And how does it all shape up? So this is December. This is December for those years reanalyzed, and you see that it is quite a strong cold signal for December. We find we have high pressure on average to our north, with low pressure over and to the east of the country, which leaves us prone to bring in easterly and northeasterly winds through these Decembers. We go through to January of these years, and again we've got 1922, 1951, 1962, 1963, of course, 1996, 1997, 2002, and 2013. And we see in January that we have, again, quite a strong blocking signal in a slightly different place to where we have it in December. In December, we have it focused on Greenland. In January, we tend to have it more focused on Scandinavia, quite interestingly. We also have signs of a more active Atlantic as well, with below average heights, low pressure to our south, coming up against that blocking feature that we have to the north. So that is implying that there is a chance we might have a very, very cold easterly month in January. We are also running the risk of having a milder month as well, and if we come out with a blend of those two options, we perhaps have the chance of quite a battleground UK month in January, with the chance of snow events as low pressure comes up against the blocking. It just depends how stubborn that blocking is. And then for these years that are coming out top with 4 or more elements of the GaussInverse.com methodology, for these years, looking at Februaries of these years, we see a very, very different pattern. In February, we see a strong signal for an unsettled month, a wet month in February, and also a significantly milder month as well, because we lose that northern blocking signal quite dramatically. And again, we find that we have generally Atlantic winds coming in. And whilst the jet stream is probably still generally to our south, overall this low pressure is so deep that it would be driving in relatively mild air off the Atlantic. These Februaries are 1922, 1951, 1962. 1963 is there, remember, so that's a very cold February as well. 1996, 1997, 2002, and 2013. So if we combine all of this together and come out with the winters for these years, this is how it looks. This is how the winters look for these years if we put them together. And we do see quite a strong blocking signal. It appears to be a signal for northern blocking and consequently for colder conditions through the winter. We also see that we get below average heights to our south. We see that we bring in generally on average easterly and northeasterly type winds, and overall it is a signal for a colder than average winter when we combine these years that come out top with 4 or more elements, come out at the top of the pack, if you like, for the GaussInverse.com winter 2017-18 forecast methodology. If we just look at the top 2, which is 1950, 51 and 1995, 1996. This is how the Decembers of those 2 winters, these are the top 2 winters for the GaussInverse methodology. This is how the Decembers look, and they look blocked and cold. So we find that we have below average heights to our south. Let's change the colour with low pressure down there. We find we have above average heights to our north through both of these Decembers. They're both cold Decembers, 1950 and 1995, with the flow going something like that. It is a signal to have a cold December with these top 2 years. We have a look at the Januaries of these winters, these top 2 winters, which is January 1951, January 1996. It's not as clear cut. We find that we do have a strong signal for a Scandinavian high, but again we have the below average heights for low pressure down to our southwest. So it's not as clear-cut cold signal for January as it is for December. Nevertheless, that's a strong ridge that we have there across Scandinavia, and it does imply that, again, we might be at risk of bringing in those cold east winds at times. Of course, with much deeper low pressure in the Atlantic, it promises the chance of a battleground situation. And then this is the Februaries of those 2 winters, 1951, 1996. Very unsettled Februaries and much milder as well. Notice the blocking signal is pushed further south away from Greenland. It's down through the central Atlantic, and it means that we do something like that with the flow, with the jet stream for these 2 winters. We lose the northern blocking signal. Bear in mind there was cold weather, however, during February 1996, much less the case in 1951. Out of the 2, despite the fact that 95-96 actually coming out top for the GaussInverse.com winter methodology with 6 elements coming together, actually I tend to favour 1950-1951 a little bit more, and the reason for that is because and I spoke about this in the 12th update that we did last week. In 1995-96, we had a tripod. The Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies had that three-way band of warm, cold, and warm. That wasn't the case in the winter of 1950-1951. So they're probably very, very closely matched in different ways, actually, but I'll probably favour 50-51 a little bit more, if anything. And I think that pretty much sums up everything that I've got to show you. So I'll just take you back perhaps to have a look at, well, just show you this one. This is December to February 1950 and 1995, 1996. So this is December to February 1950, 1951, and December to February 1995, 1996. And perhaps a little bit surprisingly, it is more of a zonal type signal actually through these two winters. But that is happening because both of the winters have low pressure below average heights for February. But bear in mind, they both are very strongly indicating above average heights around Greenland for December, and January is a little bit 50-50. I'm going to take you back to the overall winter analog for this winter if we combine these years that come out with 4 or more elements, because I think this is the most important one for us to focus on really. So it is a signal for blocking, it is a signal for above average heights to be to our north, it's also a signal for below average heights to be to our south, and it's a signal to be bringing in cold northerly and easterly winds. So that's how it looks if we bring it all together. I think that we've been looking at through this season. That is how the analog comes out. And it's a signal for a cold winter. So the GasWeather.com winter 2017-18 forecast, the headline is basically that we're going to have, or we think we're going to have, a colder winter. And I say colder rather than cold because there's a large margin for error in with this. And the reason there's a large margin for error is what's going on in January. So December looks clear-cut to be cold. We should have a colder than average December. And if we do have a colder than average December, that will tell us that the winter forecast is on track, if you like. So December looks clear-cut to be cold. February looks quite clear-cut to be reasonably mild and wet and Atlantic driven. So it looks like a bit of a front-loaded winter with the coldest weather early on, and then we get moderation later. It's January that causes the problem, and that's why there's a large margin for error with this, because if January happens to be very blocked with that Scandinavian high, then we could actually come away with a very cold January. If we was to combine that very cold January with the cold December, then we would probably come out with a really cold winter. It would be a very cold winter, even if February turned milder, if you see what I mean. But conversely, we might find that the blocking is very much reduced and weakened in January, and the Atlantic just steamrollers through it. And if it is, if that does happen, then we're probably going to be struggling to come away with anything more than an average winter. So if we pitch this somewhere in the middle, let's say it's likely to be at least slightly colder than average. We do think we'd like to have a slightly colder than average winter. So that's kind of like what we're going for, a slightly colder than average winter, but within that, there is a large margin for error that could see anything from a very cold winter to a winter that might not be much more than around average, and we just start off cold in December and then very quickly go through to a couple of mild months in January and February. In terms of precipitation, that's quite difficult to ascertain. I think it looks like we'll start off quite dry in December when it's cold, and then we could go quite wet in February when it's mild. January, again, probably coming out somewhere in between. Overall, I'd suggest probably near normal precipitation, not deviating too far from average, but masking the fact that we start off quite dry and probably progress to something wetter. So there are several things that could go wrong with the GasWeather.com winter 2017-18 forecast this season. One of the things that could go wrong is if we have a sudden stratospheric warming in January. If that was to happen, that could sort of prolong the cold signal, the blocking signal that we have in December. So if we get that sudden stratospheric warming in January, it may well be that not only will January itself, which we already know is quite well set up for a Scandinavian high, it could well be that not only is January cold, it may even extend it into February. If that was to happen, then we would, I think, come out with really quite a cold winter indeed. But again, if the blocking signal is weakened in January and we don't get that sudden stratospheric warming affecting the troposphere, then we could see that the Atlantic just steamrolls through. We've got 2002 in the analogues package, and that was a cold December. It had a cold December in 2001, and then January and February 2002 turned very mild and stormy and wet. Bear in mind, that was around solar maximum, so I don't think it's a particularly good analogue for this year, certainly in terms of the solar cycle, but it is a risk that that could happen quite clearly from the reanalysis that we just looked at. The Atlantic will be there, we think, in January. It just depends how much the block over Scandinavia can fend it off. If we do get a lot of battleground scenarios setting up in January, then I think there is a chance of some pretty decent snow events coming up this season as well. So that's pretty much it. That's the GasWeather.com Winter 2017-18 forecast. We are going for a colder winter. That's the headline, with a large margin for error. Pitching in the middle ground of that large margin for error brings us out at a slightly colder than average winter. But there is, with the margin for error, there is possibility of anything from a very cold winter, and we don't rule out and discount the chance of a very cold winter this year, all the way to just an average winter, and it will depend what happens through that middle and latter part of the winter. We believe we expect snow to be coming up greater than average through this winter, and that could be particularly the case in January if we do get those battles setting up between the low pressure in the Atlantic, the high pressure over Scandinavia. Then we could get quite a lot of battling going on, and that could produce numerous snow events. December is like to have snow at times, but it's probably going to be quite a dry December, so maybe not all that much away snow. And then of course February, if the Atlantic comes through and brings us that early end to the winter, then February will just have quite a lot of rain. And we do make up the rainfall deficit in February compared to the early part of the winter. So that's it. That's the best we can do, and we're just going to have to see how it goes. I've got really quite low confidence in this. I'm fairly confident with the December part. I'm reasonably confident with the February part as well, the milder conditions later in winter. It's just this period in January that I'm really very, very uncertain about. My hunch, because of where we are in the solar cycle, is that we are running the chance of getting some very cold weather in January, and potentially snowy as well, as the Atlantic comes up against that cold weather. But I'm just a little bit uncertain about what's going to happen through this middle part of the winter, and that's the all-important part in pitching this either for a very cold winter all the way to an average signal for the winter. So I think we're going to have to just keep monitoring how the patterns progress as we go through the next few weeks. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how things develop. We won't change this forecast at all. We don't do that at GasWeather. Some forecasters kind of keep evolving the forecast as they go along. We don't do that at GasWeather. We just issue the forecast, and at the end of the season we come back and see how we did. So I might be totally wrong about this. As I say, it is coming out with low confidence, this forecast, but it's the best I can do from our methodology. And I think at the very, very least, we're going to have our coldest winter since 2012-2013. I think we will come away with our coldest winter that we've had for 5 years. And then beyond that, it's going to be a case of how cold can we get it. Bear in mind, we do probably get a mild end. And that's it. All I've got to say now to round it up is to say a big thank you to a couple of people, to Terry Scully, whose input and forecast have helped guide the GasWeather.com Winter 2017-18 forecast a lot over the past few weeks. So a big thank you to Terry Scully. Also, many, many thanks to James Ackrill, who has brought all of this together for us today in terms of the spreadsheet and also in terms of these analogues as well, and has been such a big help to me throughout the whole of the winter update. I know James will be watching, and a big thank you to James for all of the help that he's given us once again for this season of updates. And that's it. That's the best I can do for you. So I'm going to sign off now, and what I'm going to leave you with is just a brief sort of discussion about what we've talked about, just summing up really everything that we've gone over. So I'm going to turn the speakers down, and then I'll leave you with that brief summary and just say thank you so much for watching the winter updates. It has been a very long journey this season, and I know at times some of the updates have been so long they have been quite trying for you, but been so much to talk about, and I just say thanks so much for sticking with it, and I hope you've enjoyed the winter forecast. I hope you enjoy the winter. I hope it gives you everything that you wanted. So I'm going to turn the audio down now and leave you with that final analysis of the winter forecast.